This is the real one.
Oh, this is the real one. I was thinking that we were just doing the test.
No. Hello.
Hi, welcome back, everybody.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the I Have a Feeling YouTube channel, where we make a safe space to have hard conversations from two different perspectives.
That's right.
So,
Mother, daughter.
yep.
I'm the mom.
Yeah. In case you were in case you were unclear,
know
I am
that
the
you can't
daughter
tell the
aspect.
difference between the two of us, but
Yeah, I know. It's pretty difficult.
yeah, it is.
I think people, once they know that you're my mom, then they're like, oh, I definitely see it.
Yeah,
But just from the outside, they normally don't.
yeah.
I think it's just
It's funny because when you were a baby, people used to say that you looked so much like me. It was eerie, which is really funny. But I think it's just like the big blue eyes and stuff like that. That once you did your hair darker, then we didn't look quite so much alike anymore.
Yeah, it's a little different now. This week actually Mom kind of was the one who decided to have this conversation. So how about you explain it?
Okay. Actually, was thinking when I was going over what to do this week, I was thinking that the idea of expectations, for your friends, for your family, for your boyfriend or your husband, for your life, for society, all that kind of stuff. We always have an expectation going into a situation, and sometimes those are not met, and then it's very disappointing when you get to realize that what you thought was going to happen didn't happen. What you thought was going to be good, all of a sudden it's taken a complete different turn, and you have to deal with those things and accept them and move forward with something completely different than you thought. I didn't think we were going to have a bird in the house this morning, so my expectation was a regular, normal
Yeah,
morning.
can we just address that? Because I'm not over it.
I know.
There's like, I mean, I wasn't there for the bird fiasco, but you can tell that story.
Well, there was a bird in my house. I thought he was running into the window from the outside like they always do. And then I realized, wait a minute, that bird is on the inside of the window and he's trying to get out. And so then it was a matter of trying to find a way to get the bird out of the house. And he was freaking out and I'm freaking out. And he's going in every bathroom, every bedroom. And I couldn't, it just like dive bombing me every time he'd come out of one of the rooms or whatever. Finally, he knocked himself out into a box. And then so I covered it and then I carried him outside and then he flew away. So he was fine. But it was very traumatic.
Ending to a traumatic
I know,
story.
because you know me, I thought he was going to die right in front of me. I was like, that's going to be awful.
That's awful. Well, yeah, and it's so sad because you see them just panicking. And
Yeah,
it's like,
totally panicking. He kept trying to go for the light, but it's like everywhere he went, like expectations. Everywhere he went, stopped. It was
yeah. Well, and then almost directly after that, we have a bathroom upstairs that my brother and I share, and my brother left for work, and then I dawdled on in there, to do bathroom things, and then the toilet just overflowed.
Yeah. And like not overflowed, like overflowed, ocean overflow. Like
there's water everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. So we're just like, this day did not start out how we expected. We expected to kind of cruise through and then do this, our podcast, and that was not the way it was. So.
My head hurts already.
I know, and I'm like, my heart is still beating from this stupid bird. I hope he's okay after all that.
He's probably fine. They do things like that. He
literally like bounced off and went pow into the box.
That's not funny. I'm sorry.
It's not funny, but I thought he had died in the box, and it was like, I'm never gonna get mad at your dad ever again for saving all those boxes.
See, now it's a coffin.
I know, it was I know, that was awful.
Oh my gosh.
Luckily, so Dad better wash his sweatpants because that's what I threw over the top of the box.
You should probably let him know that you used his pants.
Probably should. I just threw him
to
back
cover the dead bird.
Yeah. Well,
or not dead, but
he wasn't dead, but he was happy to be outside.
Cold.
Yeah, he went right on his back. That was so sad.
So sad.
I know. But
anyways, so I know that you made some notes about kind of expectations. So I'll kind of let you lead the conversation a little bit more, because I don't know exactly where you want to go with this idea.
Well, I don't know, because I think that it's one of those things that it's going to take whatever turn it takes. But I thought that we could maybe start with like expectations for your significant other. Like when you go into a situation, when you guys are say going to dinner, and you have an expectation of what it's going to look like. You go out and then it doesn't pan out the way you thought. Like, do you get mad? Do you get disappointed? Do you talk to the person? Like, what would you do if you wanted to go out and have a nice dinner with your date, and he wasn't in a good mood, or the restaurant wasn't open that you were going to go to, or whatever? Like, how do you bounce back from that? Do you bounce back from that, or is it something that like ruins your night? I guess that's my question.
Well, I think specifically for me, if we're going out to dinner or whatever, which is not like something that I usually do with my significant others. Not that I've never done it ever, but like I more like the idea of like staying in and doing something like that. But
Yeah.
but if we're going out to dinner, and like something goes wrong, like the restaurant isn't open or whatever, I more look at that as like a cute memory. Like that's happened to me before
Yeah.
where I've been like it was my first date with somebody, and we were trying to go first of all it was pouring rain, like pouring rain. And I was dressed up all nice because it was like our first date or whatever. Pouring rain, and neither one of us had hoods on our jackets. Don't know why.
Because it's California.
Because it's California and you don't expect it to rain.
No, never.
And we tried like 5 different restaurants and they were all closed.
Oh my gosh.
Until we finally like found a place that was open, and we were like, I don't even care at this point. Like it doesn't matter. We were both starving, but like to me that was like an adventure. It was funny. It was silly, and like I think he was more disappointed than I was. I mean, he took it well, but it was like I think he was more upset about the situation than I was. I think the times where expectations get in my way, or when I start to like I get disappointed over them, is more when it comes to like more have a thing about like flakiness. So if I'm expecting that we're gonna be seeing each other and they flake at the last second, or they tell me it's not gonna happen anymore or whatever, that's when it's really hard for me to just be okay with it. And because even if they're not necessarily flaking, even if they tell me like well in advance, they're just like, hey, I'm just not going to be able to make this anymore, blah blah blah, and it's totally like an acceptable all of it makes sense, it still is very hard for me to not be incredibly mad. But I think that goes back to like trauma than it does like me just not liking that my expectations weren't met.
So you think that it goes back to like your childhood when you weren't taken care of? I mean, like when you felt like somebody wasn't showing up for you.
Yeah, and like I couldn't trust that they would be there.
Right.
And it's sometimes like I think I start to feel, and this isn't true, but this is how it starts to feel, is that like I'm the only person who's reliable.
Right.
Like I can't trust anybody else to be reliable. It's just me.
Right.
And so I think I more expect, and it's an unfair expectation, but I expect people, especially in a romantic sense, I expect them to have perfect attendance, I guess. Like be perfectly like you said you were going to be there, I need you to show up. And I think some part of that is okay, and I think some part of that is just being in a relationship and expecting that the other person's going to hold to what they say.
Right.
But I think a huge part of that is also like an unhealthy like perfection that I'm looking for in the other person, that they're just never going to disappoint me, or that they're never going to like not be able to come to something.
So like if they really loved you, they would show up for you. They wouldn't have that car accident.
If they really cared, they wouldn't have gotten in that car accident.
I know. Wouldn't have gotten sick.
Yeah, how dare they?
I know.
They're doing it to spite me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think for me, the expectations are always that people would be approaching whatever the situation is just like me. Like I go, and even if you and I were going, so like I will assume that you think how I think. So the things that I want to do or the things that I'm expecting to do are what you expect and want as well. And I'm not always good at asking what the other person's expectation is. Like going into even a relationship or a marriage or anything like that, to say, well, okay, what do you expect out of this? What does this look like to you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because I feel like something that people will say a lot and that I don't necessarily I get it sometimes, but I don't always necessarily agree with it, is like the idea of going into something with zero expectations. I think that that's a nice thought, but I don't know that it's practical. Like I think maybe that's a little bit different when you're going into like a first date, or it's your first time meeting somebody or whatever. So it's like maybe there's more of a or even with friends, like the first time that like you meet a new friend, or you go and hang out with them and you're not exactly sure how the night's gonna go or whatever. Like I think that those kinds of situations, it's maybe a little bit easier to like drop all your expectations of what it's gonna look like. But I think when it's like a more important situation or there's more weight to it, I think it's really hard to not have any expectations at all.
Yeah, and I think that it would be weird kind of not to. Like, you go in with this open book, of like, I don't even know. Like, you almost have to have a plan of some kind of sort. But I feel like it's always that remembering to ask the other person, or what do they want it to be like, or what do they expect out of it, I guess, is exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it actually, this conversation reminds me of pretty much my only mentor at this point, who, she's fantastic, but whenever like I want to talk to her about something, she always sits me down and the first thing she asks is, okay, what do you expect out of this conversation? Like, what are you wanting to get out of this conversation?
Which is a really good question to ask,
and I mean, she doesn't ask that when we're just like casually like talking, but when I come to her with something that I'm worried about, or something that I need to talk to her about or whatever, she always asks me like, what do you expect to get from this? Like, I need to know what you're expecting so that I'm not going in a different direction and then ultimately disappointing you without even knowing.
Right. And I think that was kind of the theme that I was looking at for as far as expectations, is like, how do we let other people down too? Like, how do you, going in, you assume that for me, assume they want what I want, and without asking that question, then I also let them down. And so then I can see by their expressions and stuff that I'm not doing something right, something is wrong, or by the way they're acting. So then it's like, okay, well, how do I now what do I do? When I know that they look disappointed, do I say, are you disappointed? I mean, what do you do in that situation? Like, how do you ask somebody that?
Yeah. Well, I think recently too, something that I've noticed that is a big expectation for me, in like just general relationships, mostly romantic, but in different relationships, I really expect that people will know and understand how to apologize. Like, I have a really
That's a good one.
I have a really big problem with that. In my head, like, apologies are so important. Like, if somebody hurts someone, they do something wrong, I really find a lot of closure and a lot of like, I put a lot of importance on somebody being able to apologize genuinely. And because to me, I feel like that is a way of recognizing like that they know that they know that they did something wrong. They're addressing the thing that they did wrong, and they're saying, moving forward, this is what I'm going to do differently in order for that not to happen again, or at least in order to like work on that thing that I know really hurts you.
Right.
And when that's not given, I have a really hard time moving on from that conversation, because I'm like just going, either not apologizing at all, which is the worst, or just being like, oh yeah, sorry, and not telling me what it is that you're sorry for, or like anything like that. Like, all of that is really difficult for me. So I think I genuinely expect other people in my life to understand that when I am, or when we're, in a fight or whatever, and I get hurt, or I'm hurt by something that somebody said or somebody did, I'm expecting that they understand that, like, not only how important apologies are, but to do it without me having to force them.
Right. So your expectation of somebody, even a friend, is that they will apologize and do apologize when something goes amiss between the two of you. That's like, this is one of my biggies. Like, one of my deal breakers is that, like, I need somebody who is okay with apologizing when they're wrong.
Yes, I need them to be okay with apologizing when they're wrong. I need them to be okay with, like, I need them to be able to own up to things that they did wrong. Like, I that's so hard for me.
Because I feel like that's exactly what I'm talking about as far as expectations, is like that you go into a relationship and that's an expectation of yours. They may not have that expectation because they may be thinking, well, I'm never going to do anything wrong, or, I'm not, I'll just, there'll be a reason.
Dated
sometimes
those people before, yeah.
Yeah. But, or that the reason is enough. Doesn't need to be an apology because there was a reason. And that's a big one for me. Is like, just because there's a reason doesn't mean it didn't hurt my feelings, or it didn't affect me in any kind of way. You can have 20 reasons, but it still hurt my feelings when you didn't show up for this, or show up for that.
Here's the unfair part too, is that I think the problem comes in it's not so much the expectations that are the problem, it's the fact that you don't talk about it. It's the fact that you don't talk about the fact that, like, hey, this is what I told you, my mentor is so good about sitting me down and being like, hey, what do you expect? Like, I think that's something that in romantic relationships especially, but also just like whenever you get into a fight with anybody, is to, like, when you're trying to resolve the issue, it's being able to sit down with a person and be like, hey, what do you expect from this? Like, from this resolution? Like, what are you looking for in order to resolve this? And then also, like, what did I do when you were initially hurt, that, like, what expectation did I disappoint you in?
Right.
When that, like, being more clear about that stuff, I think is important. Because I think the act itself of having expectations is very normal and very human.
Yeah,
and I think it's more just the fact that we don't talk about it that makes it
It's a really good point.
not
that
okay.
We don't talk about it. Well, and there's weird little expectations too. Like, it kind of segues right into what I was thinking about. You know, like, for me, I go out into society. I go out into the world, like to the grocery store or to the gas station or to wherever. And my expectation is that everybody will be polite. Like,
How's that working for you?
and that's like a big fail almost every time. But then I'm bothered because I think, well, that's so easy to be polite. What is wrong with that person?
It is really easy to be polite. You're not wrong.
that they can't. But the truth is, like, what I'm not thinking is, or what I'm not realizing is, we don't know what happened to them that morning. We don't know if they got in a car accident on the way, or something blew up, or the toilet overflowed over, or they had a bird in their house, or whatever. Like, you don't know that. And so that's really not a very reasonable expectation given the state of human beings, really. You know what I mean? Or like driving. Like, you don't like bad drivers or people that cut you off or do something that you wouldn't do.
It's true.
I know.
They make me upset.
I know.
But it's less about, like, because there are certain things. It's funny too, because when I think about it from the perspective, like, the times that I've accidentally cut somebody off, or the times that I've accidentally, like, done something on the freeway or whatever, that was a bad call, or that I didn't realize I was doing, or whatever. Like, I would hope that somebody would give me, like, grace for that.
Right.
But it's hard when it happens to you to give that grace in return.
Right.
And I think there are certain situations where it's like the person is genuinely just being really rude.
Yeah.
And I think there are times where, like, they just didn't realize that it was a thing, or that they were doing something wrong.
Yeah. And I think that probably more than not, it is exactly that. 'Cause I know I've done that. I missed an exit or something like that. But I just think it's interesting about, I guess grace is maybe the answer to all of the expectations, I suppose. Like, if we talk about, we started with expectations, but maybe grace is better, would serve us better talking about giving people grace, like, for the things that they do, or the things that they don't do, or the things that they don't know how to do. Like, I always feel like people should be self-aware. Like, it really genuinely bugs me when people are not self-aware.
Yeah, I can second that one.
Yeah, it's like, but not everybody is self-aware, and not everybody is interested in delving into their psyche over whatever happened in the morning. You know, like, not everybody treats their life like that. Like, you and I want to go down in, and we want to talk about every single thing, and how come, and why, and where did it come from, and how did you feel about it? Well, not everybody is interested in that.
That's true. I would say that a lot of people aren't interested in that.
Yeah. So I label them shallow.
Something that I've learned just becoming an adult and dealing with different kinds of people is that everybody has a different emotional capacity. Like, everybody has a different, like, limit on what's too much for them.
Right.
Everybody has their moment where they're like, ma'am, this is a Wendy's. Like, whatever you're talking about is way too much.
Yeah.
And is too big for the situation. So, like, somebody like my dad is very much illogical in his head a lot, and very, like, there is no emotion about this.
Yeah, and
it's just a thing.
It baffles him that I would say, oh yeah, that makes me feel this way, and he's like, that has a feeling? Like, that doesn't even have a feeling.
But that's because you and I, and, like, I don't know, thank God, because nobody else in the family is like this.
I would be an island.
Yeah. Well, that's not fair. Like, I think both of my
No,
brothers actually
no,
do
they
have
are.
a lot
They
of
are,
a
but
lot of
yeah, but they're
emotion.
not mostly here, so
Yeah, well, and they have a different way of dealing with it, and I
Yeah.
think part of it is them like being men
Yeah.
and growing up in a society that taught them that certain emotions were not okay to express, or like they
Right.
shouldn't talk about them or whatever, which I think both of them don't necessarily succumb to, but I think that it is a pressure anyway.
I agree. It's
Um,
just kind of goes with being a guy. I
yeah,
think that
yeah.
We don't even want to have that expectation, but we still do.
Yeah.
That guys are going to be the one that we can lean on.
Yeah, which is really
It's
unfair.
kind of sad. It is unfair.
Dad's a much more logical person and a lot more like factual and like whatever, and he gets stressed out and stuff, but you and I have a thing where it's like, even if everything is pretty mundane, we can talk about like the deeper feelings behind that, or like whatever's going on, like we can like kind of pick it apart a little bit. Or talk about things that are going on like in the back of our heads or whatever, because we just have a very, very high emotional capacity.
It's true.
And that doesn't mean that we're like more like
No,
like
not superior.
in tune
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just that it's different for us than it is for somebody like Dad, who's a lot more logical and who is a lot less like in his feelings all the time.
Yeah. What about like of a family, like when you're thinking about getting married someday, and what do you want your family to look like? Talking about, you want it to look a certain way, right?
Um
Or do you not have an expectation for that?
I mean, I don't think like these are conscious expectations. Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a thing where I sit down and I'm like, this blah blah blah, blah. I think more yes, I do want to get married one day. That is a huge thing that I want.
Mhm.
I also definitely want kids. And I think that the expectation is that we're on the same page about that. Whoever I marry,
Right.
like we're on the same page about the fact that like, okay, we both, first of all, we both want to get married, but second of all, we both want to have kids. I think those are just like, especially the kids thing is like a big that's like a deal breaker thing. And I
Yeah.
didn't used to think it was, but as I've gotten older, I've realized that like, yeah, it's a huge deal if you guys don't agree on that. Like
Right.
one person can't want to have kids and the other person can't just absolutely hate kids.
Yeah, the no always wins in that kind of situation.
It
'cause
does.
You can't willingly bring a child into that when somebody doesn't want them. It's hard
Yeah.
enough, when you do want them.
It would be more tailored to like this person and who they are and what their family is like, because you join families together, and that's really
That's for
scary.
sure.
And
I know. I got
think
really lucky with that one.
You did get really
I got
lucky.
really lucky.
Dad's side of the family is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I had a mother-in-law that was like, she was always on my side, which was awesome.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. And I think that part of the thing that people my age, or at least like in my own community or whatever, that sometimes we forget is like, you're also marrying into a family.
It's
So
so
being
true.
being comfortable with how things operate and how things work in their family is really important as well. So I mean, I am a very family oriented person, and I would love for them to also be more family oriented, so that going to family gatherings and having like being like, oh, let's go to my parents for like Sunday night dinner or whatever.
Right.
I would hope that wouldn't be like pulling teeth every single time.
Right, which you've had that before.
I have definitely dated somebody who was very much like, every time that he saw you guys, it was like the world was exploding.
Yeah,
And
that
I
is
just
hard.
I could not understand that, and I
Yeah.
couldn't like get behind it either. I was like, if we get married, this is how it's going to be every time. And I
Yeah.
would love to see you guys like weekly. So, or, often enough,
I know.
and so it's
Well,
like,
I told you I'm going to pitch a tent in your backyard.
yeah, I don't know if I'll allow that, but no. No, we have limits. We have boundaries here, but but I do want to I do want somebody who's comfortable with, or is at least willing to try and be comfortable with being around the family. And I want to be able to be around them too. Like I want to be around their family as well. And I want them to know that their family is important to me. And I want to have relationships with their family members as well.
Right.
So I think I don't know if I necessarily expect that, because again, like it really depends. Like some people have really tumultuous relationships with their family.
That's
and so
true.
I don't want to push that kind of thing. But I would love that they would be willing to get to know my family
Yeah.
Even if they're not necessarily super jazzed or really wanting to like have a super close relationship with theirs.
Right. So that they would do it for you. They would do that for you.
Yeah, and I would 100% do it for them. It's
Right.
just that's again, like I said, based on their comfort level and how they feel about their family and stuff. Because some people have just really estranged relationships.
That's true. And then once again, then you go in with this thought that I think that may have happened in your situation too, where you went in with one thought that you were going to be coming over for dinner here and there, or that kind of thing, and he went in with that's never happening thing. And whereas it goes back to what you were saying about talking about, we don't talk about our expectations. We don't talk about, if you maybe not even calling them expectations, but calling them I don't know. It is expectations, though, really. Like, you assumed that he would want to come over for dinner.
Yeah, you guys are great.
I know. I think we're great.
And not even like again, it's not that he has to get along like
Right.
perfectly with every single person or whatever, but in my head, I just have never seen like family get-togethers as a problem. And I remember
Yeah.
the couple of times that he had family get-togethers, he would like try and prep me for like 2 weeks beforehand about how like traumatizing and terrible it's going to be.
Right.
And then we'd get there and there would be like a bounce house for all of the cousins and little kids and whatever. And it's just a bunch of old people talking. It's like, and so in my head, I was like, oh yeah, I'm used to this. Like, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
So I'd go and I'd introduce myself to all of his family members and I'd ask them what they, like, where they live and what they do and all this kind of stuff. And he was like so shocked that I had the capacity to do that. And I was like, it doesn't even scare me. Like, and that's because that, to me, that's normal.
That is, that's normal. A normal way of life. Yeah, that's interesting too, because his experience with his family was different than what you experienced just meeting them. So he was putting his experiences off on you. He was assuming or expecting that you were going to feel about his family the way he felt about his family.
Well, yeah, and like, and I think he gave off I think he gave off some false. I don't want to take it away from him that it wasn't his experience. Like,
Right.
I know that he had like really difficult relationships with people in his family and that they made him feel a certain way, and I don't want to take that away from him or say that that wasn't real.
Right.
But I do want to say that like he was coming from only his own perspective when he would tell me about them. And so he would tell me like, oh, my dad is like really intense and he's super like he doesn't like anybody, comfortable with new people coming into the family, just like trying to make it sound like I should expect to not be accepted by him. And so I'm going in with like, okay, like he's obviously hard to get to know, he's hard to be, and he was like the nicest person. He was so nice. He like asked me all about my life and everything like that, and then he was showing me old like videos of when my boyfriend was like a little kid and all this kind of stuff, and was like showing me all this stuff and like talking to me because he did a lot of production work, and so he was like showing me all of his really cool stuff that he uses for production stuff and all of that. And so for me, that was like, I was like, oh, cool. And then we dated for like 2 years and I never saw that man again. I saw him one time.
That's right. You did only see him one time.
Yeah.
And not even holidays or whatever.
No,
like
I can't remember what it was for, but
I think the holidays too are another weird thing too with having adult kids, is like me thinking, what is it going to look like to have holidays? Like when you guys are little, obviously you're here and I get to run the show and I get to make the food and I get to wrap the presents and get all excited and stuff like that. But as adults, you guys have other lives that have to come. I raised you so you would have a life on your own, but yet I almost feel like, but you should still be here for the important stuff. Like that's a real biggie for me. Like as a mother, grandmother, whatever, of like, oh, it'd be really nice to have everybody here every Christmas, but that's just not realistic. That's not the way things work. With the adults, you have like that kind of thing. Like someday you're going to move out, and your first allegiance will be to your husband and your family, not to me. I think I'm having trouble with getting in the back seat.
Yeah, well, that's fair too, because I mean, you've raised us and have put us, or have like, our entire lives up until really the past like maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
We've always been here for for holidays and for all
True.
that kind of stuff. And
That's
so
true.
it's really weird. I mean, even in my last relationship where things were just more serious,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, oh, even I was like, my thought was like, oh, we're always going to be here for Christmas and we're always
Mm-hmm.
going to be here for Thanksgiving and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, like, oh shoot, like his whole, like, he's not very close to his family, but he does still spend holidays with them because he's like, well, in his words, he's like obligated to.
Right.
And so like we still have to split our time,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to not be selfish in that and be like, well, my
But my
family,
family's better.
fine, we do this. Oh, we do this every single year. Like we have to be here,
Yeah. And it's going to feel really weird to not be here. I like the idea of talking about things. Like everything not everything needs to be talked about, but I think the conversations around certain things, like, why are we afraid? Like, why are we afraid to have those conversations?
Yeah, I'm sure there's fear involved in that. I think it's also just like you just don't even think about it because you're coming from only your perspective.
Yeah.
And so to you it's like, well, yeah, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And this is how I feel about this, and like you should know. It's like what I was saying before with feeling a certain way about apologizing is
Mhm.
like I expect that everybody knows how to have or how to give a very solid heartfelt apology.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's such a thing for me, but like I it's really hard for me to force that onto people.
Right.
Like it I am almost bewildered when I'm like, you do realize that you should probably apologize for the thing that you did, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that baffles me that that's a thing for
Yeah.
people.
Even getting married in my case, like I was very close to my family. Dad's very close to his family. I was close to his family, but my assumption was we would spend as much time with my family as his family when we got married. But that wasn't even logical because my family is an hour plus away and his family's right here. So that so he just figured, oh, we'll always go to my family because we're here. And what we never talked about it. And I didn't want to hurt his feelings by saying, no, I don't want to go there. I want to go there and stuff. So it's like I didn't say anything, but what I wanted to say was, but can we just also do my family sometimes? But I didn't because I was afraid that he would misunderstand that. And so it was like fear of hurting feelings because I had needs of my own.
Yeah, I think that's a thing too, is that you have to be able to communicate like about your own needs and stuff, because it those I think the expectation part of it is just the beginning, and then what it actually is like a need for something or a want,
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing exactly how to communicate that well can be really difficult in any kind of relationship, because it's like you think that the other person will just know
Yeah.
and will just understand, and that's not always the case, especially like when you come from very different backgrounds, like
Yeah.
come from very different families and different lives, where it's like you can't necessarily gauge how the other person is going to react to you,
Right.
like wanting a certain thing, or whatever, or even just knowing, like I think you start to get to a point in a relationship where, because it's important to the other person, it's important to you.
Right. And which is, I think, how it should be. This if you're in a good relationship, I think that that's one of the things that you should expect, or is that they will take your needs seriously and you will take their needs seriously, even if they're not yours.
Yeah, like they don't necessarily have to understand,
No,
but being
no, yeah.
willing to compromise on both ends of like, okay, I really want to see my family for
Mhm.
holidays, I really want to see mine, and then having to sit down and do the hard thing of like, okay, so this year we're going to your families for Thanksgiving, but we're doing mine for Christmas, and then
Right.
we'll flip,
And
like
so negotiating all the things so you do get your needs met, as opposed to just like getting mad.
yeah, or
Or
like some
something that's not
couples,
productive
yeah, some
at all.
couples I know do a thing where they go to everybody's house all in one day, and they just
Yeah.
eat very little at each spot so
Yeah.
that they have enough, they can eat everywhere, so they're not being offensive or anything like
Right.
that. And
So they spend the whole day. Like
they
going
just
from place to place.
yeah,
to
they kind of
place.
drive from place to place.
Yeah.
And if your all the families are not super far away, that probably works pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think we're talking a lot about like holidays and stuff for expectations, but I think that's a huge part of it. Like
Yeah.
is
It is.
when you're trying to figure out like this is something that's actually very important to me. Like how
Mhm.
do we work it out? And
Right. Or having dinner with family, or doing anything like that. But yeah, I was just thinking of another expectation that I always have of, like, I assume I assume going into any situation that people are going to be fair. Like I assume that they're going to be fair. I want like a little of this, a little
Well,
of that.
fair of your by your definition too.
I guess
Cause
so.
like, cause like, there's multiple different kinds of fair, but
Yeah,
it depends on who you are, whether you think something is fair or not.
I guess that's a good point. But I always feel like once you establish like what the possibilities are, then it would be like, okay, you get half, I get half. It always feels like it should be that way, and it really doesn't ever work out that way. Where there's always a direct half. Like you can split it down the middle. I mean, it's always compromised constantly.
Yeah,
I
there
feel
is
like.
always
Mm-hmm.
compromise. And yeah, it. I wish it would be split perfectly all the
I
time.
know.
But I think it depends on what's going on. Like it depends on whose needs are, um, like what each person's needs are and what's going on. I mean, like there's a lot of compromise that has to happen in relationships in general, and like you're talking about expecting things to, well, actually, honestly, I don't even know what you mean. Like what do you mean by expecting it to be fair?
And I guess it comes down to really little things like, all right, well, if you have an operating car, I have an operating car. If we have, you know, if I go grocery shopping this week, you go grocery shopping next week, or it's negotiated in something like that, or you do this and I do that, like that those conversations would happen. Because I like the whole team thing where, you do this and I'll do that. I do this and you do that, or whatever. When I think that a lot of people don't have that same idea. Some things are your job and some things are their job.
Oh, so like to you, because that was going to be my next question, was like, well, would it be fair then to say like, okay, I'll do the laundry if you do the dishes, because one might take longer than the other? So does that still feel fair in your mind, or does
I
it need
think
to be exactly the same?
no, I think if it's negotiated like that, like some people like some people don't mind doing the dishes. Some people, that kind of thing. The things that you negotiate, like I'll do this if you do that. But I think that we assume sometimes that people will do certain things, and when they don't, then we're resentful or disappointed or something like that. But yeah, I don't think it has to be like a time thing. It's more like a negotiation thing, like like I don't know, agreement that I don't know. I guess open to something other than what they have in their mind. I don't know. I think that for me, it's just that conversation of just what you were saying. Talk. We don't always talk about things.
So for you, it's more just, more than anything else, it's just them being able to acknowledge that they see that you're doing something, and that they don't want you to do everything.
Yes, that maybe that's a really good way to put it, because so you don't have to walk around thinking you're never doing enough.
So you're more just wanting to be noticed.
I think notice fair, yes, and I want to notice, and I want to be noticed for also, yeah. And that sounds really selfish though.
To want to be noticed?
Well, I mean, it sounds like I'm like all for me, or wanting to be noticed, but I do think that I think people need a lot of affirmation. And I think that somebody like me, a lot of people think that I don't need any affirmation. Like I don't ever, because I'm outspoken and all, that kind of thing. But I think that we all do need it in whatever way that is, whether it comes from doing something for somebody, or, thanking them for something, or apologizing to them for something, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we all have a desire to be noticed and seen and
Mm-hmm.
heard. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that's really important for me, when I'm talking to other people, is that I want them to be noticed. I want people to feel heard and seen and noticed. And I think because that's my desire, I think that sometimes, um, I get so lost in trying to make sure the other person feels heard that I
Mm-hmm.
don't think of making myself heard, like about the things that
Right.
I need. And then I just end up resentful, and I'm like, why do I feel so angry at them because I'm choosing to do something for them? But it's because like I'm expecting that they're going to ask me to, or that they're going to reciprocate. And again, something that my mentor said that I think was makes me upset, but at the same time is really true, is
Mm-hmm.
she was like, nobody is going to love you the way that you love someone. It's just not going to be, it's never going to be like equal like that.
So
You
there it goes
can't.
back to the whole fairness thing too. Like in my mind is you figure you put out this much energy, they'll put out the same amount of energy.
Yeah, well, and like I mean, it goes kind of back to like love languages.
Yeah.
You know, if you guys have ever taken the love languages test, I love that test. I feel like it talks a lot about.
Well, it explains an awful lot.
It
for
does,
sure.
yeah, and sometimes you can kind of just, you don't even necessarily have to take the test, but there's like 5 different love languages of how you feel most loved. And for me, it's words of affirmation and physical touch are the ones that are like the most important to me. And it's true. I need like whoever I'm with to, because I'm very big on like giving words of affirmation too, as
Yes,
as
you
love.
You are. Yeah. You're very much like that.
Yeah, and so I'm always telling people like how much I love them and what they do and what like how they are that makes me feel that way and like that kind of thing. And I'm expecting that it's going to be this like back and forth of like, oh, and I love this about you and blah blah blah, and like,
So
and when that
fair,
doesn't
kind of.
happen, yeah, I mean,
I know that's a really broad term, but yeah, but when you do something for somebody, you figure it's going to come back at you to the same degree.
yeah, which is such an unfair expectation
Yeah.
because not everybody feels loved that way. Like, have you ever tried to give my brother a compliment?
Yeah.
He gets incredibly uncomfortable.
He gets really uncomfortable.
And he just thinks that you're lying.
He does. Yeah.
And so it's like that doesn't make him feel loved.
Yeah.
He tolerates it from me because he knows that that's something that I love, or that's something that's a way that I show love.
Right.
But I've learned that acts of service for him is he feels a lot more loved that way.
Yeah.
So like if I like make him something, or if I remember, to help him, like I bring his mail up to his room or whatever, like doing things like that, he feels a lot more loved than he does when I'm just sitting there going, I love you so much, you're so cute, I love you.
I know, he does get really uncomfortable. He like runs away.
Please stop. I have chased him around the house telling him all the things I love about him, and he's like, leave. Like, go away.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I'm the acts of service too, and I think that expecting that to come back at me to the same level that I would do something for somebody else, but I'm an action oriented person. So for me, loving somebody means putting action to something, and then figuring that everybody's going to do the same thing, and not everybody does that or rises to that level of activity, I think. as I would expect from them. So yeah, that's
not everybody's as energetic as you, for sure. But I think that like it's a good thing to think about, like, how do you as a person feel most loved, and how does the other person feel most loved? And I actually think that you can find out a lot about what their expectations are based on those things.
Yeah,
because I feel most loved by words of affirmation and physical touch, I expect that whoever, and we'll just go with dating, because it can be kind of different for me with friends, but whoever I'm dating, I'm expecting that they're going to tell me how much they love me all the time.
Right.
And are also going to give me very frequent hugs and like hold my hand and that kind of thing. So when those things don't happen, or that's not their first like inclination, I am going to feel rejected. And so I think that it's actually really, even if you're not necessarily talking about expectations, or maybe you can't necessarily like sit down and have a conversation about like, okay, I expect this and you expect this, and like maybe it, like, you can't necessarily word it that way, but think about the ways that you feel most loved or most cared for, and how the other person does, and that probably will tell you a lot about what you naturally will expect, or how you'll end up feeling hurt if they don't do a certain thing.
Which kind of goes back to what we were saying about what I was saying in the very beginning about I expect other people to think the way I think, and but I don't think that out loud, or I'm not thinking that they have to be like me, but I assume that if I do things for people because I love them, that they'll do things for me because I love them. So I am not always I'm always thinking that everybody sees the world the way I see the world. And so for me, that's where I have to get out of my own way and say, like, okay, step back. This person likes this, or this person likes that. They don't see it that way. They don't see running around like a nut is necessarily helpful, Or sometimes if you do things for somebody, Like Dad's a good example. If you do something for him, it kind of bothers him because he thinks
It does bother him.
he thinks he should be doing it for himself, and he doesn't want you to do it for him because then it makes him feel bad.
I can't even feed the dogs before he gets home.
I
Otherwise, he
know.
gets really upset.
I know, because you're taking over what he thinks is either his responsibility what, or he feels like nobody should have to do my work for me. It's kind of, I think,
Right.
in his mind, it makes him feel less than, even though you feel like you're doing something to help. For him, it's like, yeah, but then I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think it's it you have to keep that in mind, like, cuz exactly like what you were saying about expecting that everybody's going to think like you is that can be so damaging on
Yes.
both ends, because um you're in your head it's loving,
Yes.
and to them it's really not. Like, I have ran into this with birthdays. In my head, when it's your birthday, you at least get together with either family or friends
Right.
or whatever. You get together. Maybe you don't do anything big. Like, I've never really had like super huge birthday parties or whatever. But you get together. You guys like either go to dinner or you just hang out for. I know
Have
my
dinner
best.
at home, yeah.
Yeah, my best friend and I will we always get together for each other's birthdays, and we'll go and get like a bottle of champagne and pizza, and we'll just be up until 2-3 a.m. and just be talking or whatever, or I'll spend the night, and we'll just have fun, and like that's kind of how we celebrate. So it's not necessarily like a party thing, but I expect that other people want that as well. And again, not to keep bringing it up, but in my last relationship, there was like he hated his birthday.
Yeah, I remember you doing something specifically on his birthday.
It wasn't even that it didn't, like, it's not like he was upset, but he just didn't care. And I was expecting that he was going to be like happy or
flattered, yeah.
genuinely like appreciative, excited. And he just didn't care at all. And I was
you
like,
were really hurt. Your feelings
and
were
I
really
was
hurt.
so hurt because it was like, I was like, I did that for you, you know?
Yeah.
But I wasn't thinking about the fact that for him, like birthday celebrations and even recognizing that he's getting older or whatever, to him is like depressing.
Yeah.
So but I was like trying to force what I felt about it onto him and say that like, well, everybody likes their birthday. Like, here, we're doing something, or we're like celebrating in some way. And it was just like, he was like, I don't know why you're expecting me to be happy with something that I already told you I don't like and don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so listening to that, when he said, I don't really like celebrating my birthday, you said, but I like celebrating your birthday.
But I like it, so therefore we're doing
this
it.
This is what we're gonna do. So kind of not forcing, but that expectation of that if I like this, they like this, or they should at least try and like this, or because I've done this for them.
Well, and also it's like in my head I'm being loving. So it's like, why are you going to not like the fact that I'm being loving towards you? But I will say that if I'm thinking about it in the opposite way, like if I told somebody that I was dating that I really didn't like a certain thing, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that I would really hate, because like them, if they gave me like a birthday surprise or something like that, I'd probably cry. Like, that kind of stuff I really like. But I think if it was something like, I don't know, they wanted to do something, okay, here's a good example. Like, we've been to like a big like going to the Shout House in San Diego, right? Like this, it's like a really big like, it's like a bar, but there's also live
dueling
entertainment.
Pianos,
like a dueling pianos bar kind of thing. It's really cool. The people up there are super talented. But one thing that they do that horrifies me is that they randomly pick people out of the crowd and either like mess with them or they bring them up on stage to do like embarrassing things.
They do.
And I think that is the most horrifying experience. I have childhood trauma from being at school and having teachers that were like, we pick sticks in this classroom, and like your name was written on little popsicle sticks and then thrown into a cup, and they would just randomly pick ones for them to answer questions. Oh my gosh, that was absolutely a nightmare for me.
So being called on or called out in
being
some kind
called
of way.
on, called out, I'm not ready to, like, I did not consent to this. I did not say that I had an answer and you're forcing me to answer.
Right.
And it, like, that is, I think it's incredibly unfair.
It is.
And puts people on the spot and embarrasses people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't like that at all. Now, when you're at like a, you know, a bar in San Diego, most people are drunk, most people are willing to like do something like that. But
Or if you're not, somebody else is.
somebody else is, yeah. But it I am not like that, no matter what. I don't want to get up in front of people I don't know. And so I'm trying to think of from the opposite direction. Like if I told my significant other, like, hey, I really hate like this idea of being called up on stage. Like it makes me really anxious.
Yeah.
I don't want to be picked out of a crowd. Like I want to sit in the back. Like I love watching it, but I
Yeah,
do not want to be
But
one of the
don't make
people.
me, don't make me subject
And
to
then
that.
he, you know, maybe it was my birthday or something, and he planned something out where I was forced to get up on stage.
Right.
And in his head, it's like, haha, this is so funny, this is so
fun.
loving.
Yeah, you'll do it. You'll like it.
Yeah, you'll like it. You'll have so much fun. It's just a sweet. I'm being loving towards you. I'm giving you like a big birthday celebration or whatever. I would be so upset.
So you would be angry that they didn't listen to what you asked, or that you had something that something that you particularly did not like, and they overrode that and just went ahead and did it anyway because they believed it was fun or
Yeah, like they thought it would be
interesting
funny or they thought it would be cute or whatever, not taking into consideration at all that it would make me incredibly uncomfortable.
right.
So I think like if I look at it from that perspective, then I still kind of feel bad for what I did because
Mhm.
it was like I didn't realize that I was overstepping in something and making him feel really uncomfortable.
Right. Right. Yeah. Or then somebody's trying by doing that, like by putting you up on stage or calling you out in some kind of way or whatever. It's not only ignoring what you said, but also trying to make you not feel the way you feel.
Yeah, it's
Well, don't be embarrassed. You're not. You shouldn't be embarrassed. You're, that kind of thing.
well,
But
I am.
I
so-
am, and this is what I feel. So that kind of ignoring, as not, yeah,
almost saying that like your feelings aren't valid.
right, and don't feel that way anymore because it makes
Because I was being loving.
I want to do something. Yeah, that's a hard one too. When you really, really, truly think you're being loving, and they say no, don't do that, and it's like, yeah, but give it a try.
Yeah.
At least try.
And
because
that's so unfair.
Right.
And it's like it's the same thing as when we talk about it in the opposite direction of like I expect that they're going to do X, Y, and Z when somebody doesn't apologize to me, like when somebody doesn't give an honest apology to me,
Mhm.
it makes me feel really upset and really like sad and hurt, and I feel
Mhm.
like I haven't been noticed and that there isn't closure.
Mhm.
And like for other people, like that's not important at all. And so I have to
Right.
be understanding of the fact that like they might be coming from a spot where nobody in their family ever apologized and like they don't really care about apologies and
Right.
that kind of thing, and it's just not natural for them. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be compromise, and like that they shouldn't, kind of learn, okay, like this is this is how she feels loved. I want to
Mhm.
do this when I genuinely make a mistake. But then I also have to be understanding that sometimes I might have to ask for what I need.
Right. Right. Yeah, I don't know that I need necessarily a verbal apology, but I need behavior to change.
Right.
Like, because that whole back to action thing, I need you to behave in a way that's not like that anymore. Whatever that was. If you overstep or you do something for a birthday that I don't like, whatever. I expect that now, okay, you made that mistake. That's fine, but just don't do it again. Like
Right.
don't continue doing that. That I feel loved when they don't, not necessarily with the words, but when their actions change. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't even know that. I will not do that again. And then they don't.
That's the thing though, is that it's like I want the action to change as well, because
Yeah.
I don't want them to just lie.
Of course.
But
But some people can. I mean, there's a lot of people that'll just, I'm sorry. And it's
oh
like,
yeah, and that's not fair either.
Yeah.
But like that's the thing though, is that I feel like when there's a genuine apology, there will be action and there will
Mhm.
be change because you genuinely feel bad.
Yeah.
Like I'm a words of affirmation person. I
Mhm.
need somebody to look at me and tell me how they feel and what they're going to do differently and then hold up to that.
Right. So in a relationship, that is one of like a deal breaker expectation. Like you go in, you would have to ask for that going in. Like the conversation you would have would be, when we had get in a fight, I need to make sure that you're gonna apologize, like that you apologize for whatever your part was in it.
Yeah, and
Something like
that
that.
doesn't keep me like I will also
Of
apologize,
course.
of course. But
So do you expect the same thing from yourself then?
oh yeah.
Yeah. So your intention is to apologize and own it.
Yes.
And so do you expect the same thing of the other person?
And it's again, it's not even necessarily about like this is just like I'm talking about apologies because
Mhm.
that's like um part of the thing that I've noticed like not everybody really does.
Mhm.
But it with anything it's like I need I need a genuine statement that we are on the same page.
Mhm.
Because it's really hard for me to not have those conversations because I'm sitting there thinking the worst. I'm thinking like they didn't notice, they're ignoring the problem.
Mhm.
They're not going to change any behavior because they haven't told me they're going to change any behavior. So I
Right.
think
So back to words of affirmation. This is what I'm gonna do. I messed up. This is what I'm gonna do.
yeah, so that I have that in my head
Mhm.
so that when my my little demons come out and are like he doesn't care about you.
Right.
They hate you. Like they're never going to love you ever again. Like when those voices come into my head, I have a verbal statement in my head of like, no, this is what they said. They
Right.
acknowledged it. They acknowledged that it was an issue and they love me enough to like change it and they said that.
Mhm.
So that makes it easier for me because if I'm just left to my own devices, I'm going to just assume that they don't care about me.
Right. So you need closure in conversations, or with when you have arguments or whatever. You need the closure of being on the same page, or
Yes.
I understand what you're saying. Whatever.
Yes.
I like that too. I like when somebody says, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Even if they don't like it or they don't understand it themselves, but to be able to put themselves in my shoes and say, okay, well, I can kind of see it from that point of view, even though I wouldn't do it that way.
Right.
Yeah. I always have that. I figure people, that goes back to that self awareness thing too. I expect everybody wants to be self aware. Like, not everybody wants to dig that deep into it, like, or make the things that complicated, emotionally complicated, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean I don't even think that it's they don't want to be self-aware, but I think it's just that they don't want to spend the time on like digging everything out of themselves.
Right.
And that's really that's easy for you and I, but that's really hard for some people.
It is, and it's hard. That's, I guess I should like take my own advice, right? Because that's not easy for everybody. It is easy for me. It's like that thing that you figure things that are easy for you are easy for everybody else. Kind of the same thing. What I think is what they think.
Yeah, yeah. So those are
Which is
that's like
kinda-
a
yeah.
those are some unfair expectations, I guess,
Yeah.
that come in relationships and that and in the end it's about like what makes you feel loved and expecting other people to know that and like that can be really difficult on both parties because one person is feeling like oh like this is what they will do
Mm-hmm.
when we get into a rough spot and the
Right.
other person is just elevator music because there's no like they don't think that way.
Right. Or yes, or like for me, I want to hash out, like if I want to have an argument, I want to hash it out now. I want to go.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
I want to. No way. Nobody's leaving the room.
We will be here all day.
Because I don't want to walk away and have it be left undone.
Me either. Yeah.
And but then on the other hand, then I have a spouse who needs time.
Yep.
That needs time to process, to think, to consider, to just contemplate whatever the problem is and run around his head and all that kind of stuff. Which well, luckily for us, we've come to a compromise where I will give him some time, but I put a deadline on it.
Yeah.
So that's our our compromise at this point in our lives. Okay, but by Friday we need to have talked about this, or your time's up. You need to make a decision. You know?
Well, and I think too, like I'm a very slow processor, so like I do need time to think about things. But if I'm mad in a moment, I want to talk about it right now.
Yeah.
I want to talk about
I
it
know you're scary.
right now. I have a feeling about this, and we need to sort it out now because I don't want to feel this way. But and I'm much more like I think I'm just much more willing to be like, hey, that hurt my feelings than I used to be.
Yeah.
And I put a lot of and unfairly of me, I don't think it's always fair, but I think I put a lot of pressure on the other person to prove something to me in that moment. Like, hey, like, you made me upset when you said this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really very, and it's not a good thing, but I'm very harshly judging their response. Like, when you get something tossed at you, when somebody says, hey, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this,
Yeah.
how do you respond? And I judge very harshly on that, because in my head I'm like, you need to be able to immediately stop what you're doing and think about what it is that hurt me.
Right.
And
how dare you be doing something different, or want to do something different, and
yeah, so it's like
talk about the feelings that go with it.
yeah, and so that's not a very healthy thing, but in the end, like, I do need time to process and to think, but I need to get out the emotion part of it
Yeah.
immediately.
Right.
Like, I need to get out like the I'm mad, this is what hurt me, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to like, okay, what can we do to solve it, or what can we do to make this different next time? I need time for that aspect
Yeah.
of it.
I need to get over my anger, because I get so angry in the moment that I'll say things that I regret.
Yeah.
So I don't really necessarily need time to process, but I need time to put it into words that are not hurtful.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, stay away for a little bit until I get over all the 4-letter words. Get back to the productive words.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But that's funny, because some people would think, like you're saying, I want to deal with it now. So, but if you make me deal with it now, I'm going to say bad things.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm almost like, I think I am almost maybe not wanting that, but I think I tend to just be like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, if you're gonna hurt my feelings, like, hurt my feelings to my face.
Yeah.
And I think that can be so detrimental, because usually people don't mean to hurt me. Like, they
Right.
weren't trying to be hurtful.
Well, and often you don't want to be hurt. Like, you don't want like those confrontations until you get really mad.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, now I want to. Now you're mad. Like, then you get scary when you're.
Well, it's not even that I don't want the confrontations, because I do, but I get progressively more angry the more that they don't notice that what they're doing is a problem.
Mm.
So it's like I'm wanting to give them a chance of like, okay, can they just like address this, or like, or I'll make a much more calm and gentle comment about it. But if it continues to be a problem, then it does start to get to a place where I'm like, how do you not notice?
Right. So there's when you're saying that you kind of judge harshly, like,
yeah,
like, this is not. It's a character issue.
it is. Which that's my own problem. Like, I definitely can say that that's a very unhealthy part of me, but
and it definitely is my own problem too, because I assign characteristics to certain behaviors or whatever. Like, somebody who doesn't up and do something right away, to me, then they're lazy. Like,
yeah.
And that's not right either, to take what I would do with the situation and then put that on them. Like, say, okay, now how I would deal with it is how I expect them to deal with it. And if they don't, they are something. They are this or that, which is really unfair too.
Right. Those were some of our thoughts about expectations.
Yes. And I think that it
comes with
does, in a broad sense, they kind of go along with a lot of things.
Yeah, I think
being aware of it. I think being aware of them is probably the bottom line from like wrapping up this conversation. I think is exactly that, is being aware of what you do expect.
Yeah.
And then being able to say, this is what I would like to see happen out of this situation, or out of whatever,
Yeah.
And not be afraid to say, this is what I would like to see happen.
Right. In like a calm, manner. Like before the situation happens at all, or before you get to a point where you're so mad that like it doesn't.
Right. Because then you're pushing, well, like me, and then I'm assigning character flaws to them.
Yeah. Yeah, which is super unfair, because it's like
totally
it's
unfair
not,
because they're not up and doing something because they're doing something else. I wanted them to drop everything and do what I think they should do in that moment. That doesn't make them lazy. That means they were busy doing something else.
Right. Well, and I think too, like you and I both talked about how we both have very long strings. Like I can be very patient. But it's when there's like a certain point, and it's different in every situation, but there's a certain point where it's like, okay, now I'm mad.
Yeah.
And like that's unfair, because it's like if I had the conversation before I was just waiting for them to notice how patient I'm being with them.
Because we expect
we might avoid this.
We expect them to notice. We expect when certain things happen, it's obvious, and so the expectation is, well, you're going to notice, so I don't have to point it out. Do I really have to point that out to you?
Right.
Yeah. Which you assign then a character issue, right? Like, God, that's not very observant of you.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
To not notice that kind of thing.
Exactly. Well,
Life
good
is
talk.
yes. Yes.
So yeah, that was kind of our whole spiel about expectations. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please follow us on Instagram. It's at I have a feeling 2, the number 2. It'll also be linked down in the description if you want to go and check that out.
Yeah.
And then also please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know
That'd be great.
anything that you might want to hear us talk about.
Yep.
And
What your expectation is for
yeah, what kinds of expectations do you guys
for
have?
something that you would like to see us talk about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, in that sense as well.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.